Hey everybody, JDR Exospace here, and we are back with more from the Reddit Whistleblower. If you've been following my channel, then you're already up to speed, but a quick recap for those of you that haven't. Someone claiming to be a molecular biologist has come forward anonymously on a Reddit thread, claiming to have worked on alien bodies. Now, for those of you that have already been watching my channel, we've already taken a deep dive into the morphology and genetics and some of the things that this guy has claimed. But this time I wanted to focus on something a little bit differently. So we've already gone into what these creatures are, and now we're going to take a deep dive into why. Why are they here? What is their purpose? What are some of the things that they believe in? Now, if this guy really is a molecular biologist like he claims he is, this really wouldn't have been his area of study, but he did talk about it, so we're going to talk about it too. So he doesn't really get into the why they're here until he gets down into the question and answer phase. And there's only really a couple of questions that he posted here that dive into it, but they are very, very interesting. All right, here we are. Question 2. Well, that was a read. So they are bioengineered worker bees? Any elemental components that are unattributable to our biome? Answer. Yes, knowing that they're disposable, unable to live independently without technological support, and that they're ephemeral. The only suitable hypothesis is that they are alive only to accomplish their task. So very interesting, right? We're essentially describing these individuals as just worker bees as part of a larger hive mind. Unable to live independently without technological support, that's also very interesting and ties back into some of that morphology we discussed in previous videos. They're relying on what he suspects is a liquid diet composed primarily of carbohydrates and proteins, and they actually have vestigial mandibles and no jaw and no teeth. So something essentially is processing their food for them and delivering it to them in a liquid form. That part doesn't necessarily get into the why until we get to the next question, but here we go. Question 3. I haven't read everything in detail, but can you expand on the document on their religion? Apparently this guy posted something about the religion, or at least discussed it in the original post. I haven't been able to find that part yet. Answer. EBOs believe that the soul is not an extension of the individual, but rather a fundamental characteristic of nature that expresses itself as a field, not unlike gravity. In the presence of life, this field acquires complexity, resulting in negative entropy, if that makes sense. This gain in complexity is directly correlated with the concentration of living organisms in a given location. With time and with the right conditions, life in turn becomes more complex until the appearance of sentient life. After reaching this threshold, the field begins to express itself through these sentient beings, forming what we call the soul. Through their life experiences, sentient beings will in turn influence the field in a sort of positive feedback loop. This in turn further accelerates the complexity of the field. Eventually, when the field reaches a critical mass, there will be a sort of apotheosis. It's not clear what this means in practical terms, but this quest for apotheosis seems to be the EBO's main motivation. So apotheosis has multiple meanings. There's one that's kind of like deification of like something ascending to godhood, and there's also this alternative meaning where you're sort of reaching this purest or highest form of yourself. And I think that latter version is what he's discussing here. He's talking about life essentially achieving its purest form of complexity and this purest expression of what they're referring to as a soul. And yeah, I don't exactly know what to do with that or what to make of that. I think I misspoke in one of my previous videos when I discussed their belief in a religion. I kind of glossed over this question. I don't think it's a religion so much, or even a belief system, as much as it's just an idea or a motivating force, or at least that's how he's describing it here. He goes on, the author of the document added his reflections and interpretations as an appendix. So an important note here, he's not actually describing something he worked on himself. He's describing a document that he saw that was authored by someone else during his time working in this research lab. He specified that for them, the soul field is not a belief, but an obvious truth. He also argues that the soul loses its individuality after death, but that memory and experience persist as part of the field. This fact would influence the philosophy and culture of EBOs, resulting in a society that doesn't fear death, but which places no importance or reverence on individuality. This belief compels them to seed life, shape it, nurture it, monitor it, and influence it for the ultimate purpose of creating this apotheosis. Paradoxically, they have little or no respect for an individual's well-being. So this ties back into that kind of hive mind philosophy that drives them. And it's not necessarily a religion or even a belief. He puts belief in quotation marks. It's kind of like their motivating force, and it kind of describes a lot of the theories that have already been out there about what compels alien life to begin with. You know, this idea that they're just seeding life throughout the galaxy on habitable planets, and maybe that's what's going on here. They're almost describing the soul as sort of a not as much of a belief system, but a universal truth similar to like how gravity works. You know, those same laws that apply everywhere in the universe, they're kind of talking about it apparently in these terms of absolutes. And he cautions here at the end, please be advised that I'm speaking from memory of something I read more than 10 years ago. So take the following with a grain of salt. Also, I'm not a philosopher or an artist, so please excuse my struggle to properly formulate the concepts in my dry terminology. Finally, note that this information comes from a document whose author was directly interacting with an EBO. It is not specified whether it was an ambassador, a crash survivor, or a prisoner. The means of communication were not specified either. Okay, so if this guy really is who he says he is, he's a molecular biologist, and it's compartmentalized as much as this guy and a bunch of other whistleblowers have claimed that this type of work is, he wouldn't have been involved in this field, but he's describing something else that he read. Now, for those of you that are skeptics in the comment section that just don't want to believe any of this, the reason I want to address this, other than the obvious just philosophical fascination that I have with it, is this is probably the element of this story that is the most hoaxy and seems to be the part where he's kind of maybe branching out a little bit more than his background in molecular biology. But the thing I find very interesting, and the reason, again, why I'm always naturally skeptical, but I just can't shake this feeling that the way that he is speaking about things that he doesn't know. So if you have any kind of background in like trained scientific thought and scientific theory, especially at an advanced level, the way that he claims he is, you're very comfortable with the phrase, I don't know. It's kind of like fundamental to how the scientific theory works. You have to be willing to drop and abandon everything that you thought you knew if more data comes in. And so this phrase, I don't know, or this isn't my field of expertise, it's very common among scientists. And it's, again, you can even see it with me talking in some of the other videos. Like, I'm not as comfortable with genetics and molecular biology, and I'm absolutely willing to say so. And those are just kind of like the way scientists talk to each other when you're admitting that, it's not my field of expertise, so I don't want to draw conclusions about something I don't know. This person, whoever this is, seems to be very willing to talk about things in a way that's like, well, I could be wrong. This is just something I read. So to me, it kind of comes across as genuine. I mean, again, if this is a hoax, this guy is doing a phenomenal job, better than any hoax I've ever seen. You know, usually when I see stories that are clearly hoaxes, I don't even cover them. You know, I know this is a new channel, but I don't really want to focus on things that are obviously hoaxes because they're just not very interesting to me. Take the Las Vegas story, for example. That one, yeah, it happened around the time that I was creating this channel, but there were so many elements of it that I just thought, I'm going to wait for the facts to come out before I even make a video about it or draw any conclusions from it. And from all accounts, that Las Vegas encounter that happened right around the time of the David Grush whistleblower, it seems like the dude saw a meteor, and then everything else from there just, I don't know, it doesn't pass the smell test for me. This, on the other hand, I don't know. I don't know what to make of it. It could be a fantastic hoax. It could be legit. Now, there's a couple of comments here, like further down in the comments section, where he does actually answer some questions that he didn't post in his original thread that I want to address here because they also touch on this concept, right? So one of the comments is, this is absolutely fascinating. I'm sending this link to my dad. So OP, you seem to say that these grays were genetically designed using animal genes from Earth as well as unknown genes. Does this mean the grays were created specifically for interacting with humankind? Are grays the middlemen between humanity and an unknown group? His post was that the hypothesis is that they were created to perform their tasks and be able to survive with only local resources. They must therefore be able to metabolize local organic resources. Now, yeah, and again, it gets into the conspiracy stuff about like cattle mutilation stuff. I'm not even going to take that seriously. What he's essentially talking about here, this goes back to that kind of chimera. So it's combining like human DNA, some other animal DNA, and it sounds like it's this creature that is produced here on Earth rather than born to accomplish this task, to kind of seed life and nurture life along, monitor it, and that's the only reason for their existence. So how they're created, where they're manufactured, he doesn't really touch on this in this article, and the rest is all conjecture. Very interesting stuff. But yeah, I don't really know where to go with that other than to speculate. You know, one of the comments says they might be manufactured in the ocean. I have absolutely no data to confirm that. That's just, as far as I'm concerned, pure conjecture, but still very interesting. All right, so if he's a molecular biologist, again, like he says he is, this wouldn't have been his area of study. He wouldn't have even really been exposed to this, other than how he's saying, which is just reading a paper that someone else, perhaps, that had an encounter with this creature might have composed. If we look at this logically and we take this person out of it, whoever he is that he claims to be, who is the person that would have communicated with this alien to come up with a complex enough understanding of its reasons to be here that they could have arrived at something approaching a belief system. That would imply that they're able to communicate with one another. And as we discussed in a previous video about their morphology, they don't have vocal cords the way that we do. They apparently communicate with vibrations of their lungs. So we're not even sure if they have vestigial mouths that they're able to communicate verbally with us. So are they coming up with some kind of sign language? Are they communicating, again, telepathically, like we discussed in that morphology video, where they have these nodules in their brain that allow them to interact with their technology? Does that account for some of the eyewitness testimony about these aliens' ability to communicate telepathically? Don't know. How did they communicate? How did they get this information about this belief in a soul, or this vision of a soul as an absolute truth? Don't know. Not confirmed in this post. No way for me to verify it. It's not something scientifically I can look at and say, this makes sense, this doesn't make sense. You either take this guy at his word that he read this paper, or you are convinced that this is a hoax and what I'm saying is not going to convince you at all. Draw what conclusion you want from that. But anyway, we're going to keep diving into this, and there's more to come. But stay tuned, and we'll catch you on the next one.